Marcus Wellington III had one non-negotiable requirement for his future wife. She had to be untouched, pristine, a virgin. Because in his world, purity was the only currency that mattered. The crystal chandeliers of Wellington Manor cast prismatic light across the mahogany table where Marcus sat, swirling cognac in a glass that cost more than most people's rent. At 35, the tech billionaire had everything. Private jets, a penthouse in Manhattan, a collection of vintage cars, but no heir. His grandmother, Eleanor Wellington, the family matriarch, had made it clear the empire needed a bloodline, and not just any bloodline. It needed to be pure, untainted, preserved. "I've found her," Vivienne Harris announced, gliding into the study with the confidence of a woman who'd brokered billion-dollar marriages before. Her Louboutins clicked against Italian marble as she placed a portfolio on the table. "My goddaughter, Camilla, 28, Stanford MBA, comes from the Harris pharmaceutical family, and yes, Marcus, she's a virgin, saved herself from marriage, just like you wanted." Marcus studied the photographs. Camilla was beautiful. Honey brown skin, elegant features, the kind of woman who belonged on magazine covers. But it was the merger potential that really interested him. Harris Pharmaceutical and Wellington Tech could revolutionize healthcare AI. This wasn't just about a wife, it was about dynasty. "Set up a meeting," he said, closing the portfolio. "But Vivienne, I'll need proof. Before any ring touches her finger, she goes to the hospital. I want medical confirmation." Vivienne's smile never wavered, but her manicured fingers tightened around her Hermes clutch. "Of course, my Camilla has nothing to hide." Outside, thunder rumbled, the first warning of the storm to come. Camilla Harris stood in her walk-in closet, staring at her reflection and rehearsing the biggest lie of her life. "I'm a virgin," she whispered to the mirror, smoothing down her cream Chanel dress. The words tasted like copper pennies on her tongue. Behind her, designer bags lined the shelves, Birkin, Dior, Valentino, all purchased with money that was running out faster than her family's reputation could sustain it. "You can do this," Vivienne said from the doorway, her voice sharp as a blade. "One meeting, show him elegance, intelligence, class. Make him fall for the idea of you." Their first date was at Les Bernardines. Candles, oysters, champagne that sparkled like liquid diamonds. Marcus was handsome in a cold, calculated way. Chiseled jaw, skin the color of warm oak, eyes that assessed everything like a balance sheet. He asked about her education, her values, her vision for the future. 3 months into their courtship, Marcus slid a black American Express card across the table and said the 5 words that made Camilla's blood run cold. "Before we marry, you'll need testing." The card sat between them like a landmine at Nobu, where they just finished a $2,000 dinner. Around them, Manhattan's elite pretended not to stare at the billionaire bachelor who'd finally found his match. Camilla's Instagram was blowing up with comments. #BlackLove, #PowerCouple, #goals. She'd spent the last 90 days shopping on Fifth Avenue, posting photos from Paris, and playing the role of Marcus's devoted girlfriend while secretly panicking about the inevitable. "Testing?" she repeated, her voice steady despite the drumbeat of her heart. She touched the card but didn't pick it up. "Like, what kind of testing?" He leaned back, his Tom Ford suit catching the low lighting. "My family physician, Dr. Chen, top gynecologist in New York. It's just a formality, baby. A full physical, blood work, and yes, confirmation of your virginity. My grandmother insists. It's about preserving the Wellington lineage, you understand. The restaurant suddenly felt too hot, too small. She reached for her wine, buying seconds to think. In the background, a jazz quartet played something smooth and mournful. That's extremely invasive, Marcus. You're asking me to prove something that should be taken on trust. Trust? His laugh was soft, almost kind. Camilla, we're talking about a $500 million merger and the future of two family empires. I need more than trust. I need documentation. He reached across the table, taking her hand. His touch was warm, possessive. You said you've been saving yourself, so this should be easy, right? Just a quick appointment, and then we can move forward. I'm thinking a spring wedding. Your mother already has the venue picked out. Camilla smiled, lifted her glass in a toast, and knew she was absolutely screwed. Dr. Zara Mitchell was suturing a gunshot wound in the ER when her entire world collapsed into a single text message. We need to talk about your mother's theft. Come to the plaza, room 1847, or I'm calling the police. Her hands trembled as she tied off the final stitch. The patient, a 17-year-old kid caught in a drive-by in Harlem, groaned as she worked. You good, Doc? He mumbled through the pain meds. Yeah, baby, I'm good, Zara lied, her voice steady despite the fear clawing up her throat. She was anything but good. She finished bandaging him, stripped off her gloves, and checked her phone again. The message was from Vivienne Harris, a name that sent ice through her veins. Her mother, God rest her soul, had worked as the Harris family's accountant before she died of cancer 2 years ago. Zara had barely scraped together enough for the funeral, working double shifts at Mount Sinai while drowning in medical school debt. An hour later, she stood in that Plaza Hotel suite facing Vivienne and a young woman who looked eerily like her. Same honey brown skin tone, similar height, same deep-set eyes. The woman was Camilla, and she looked miserable. Sit down, Dr. Mitchell, Vivienne said, gesturing to a velvet chair. She opened a leather folder, spreading documents across the coffee table. Bank statements, transfer records, emails, all with her mother's signature. Your mother embezzled $200,000 from the Harris family trust. I have evidence that could send her estate into legal hell and destroy your career before it starts. One call to the medical board about your mother's fraudulent activities, and you'll never practice medicine again. My mother would never, Zara started, but the words died when she saw the papers. They looked real, too real. Here's the deal, Vivienne continued, lighting a cigarette despite the no-smoking policy. You spend one night pretending to be Camilla. One night with Marcus Wellington. You pass a simple medical exam first, then you consummate the relationship. He'll be properly sedated. He won't remember details. You do this, and these documents disappear forever. Zara looked at Camilla, who couldn't meet her eyes, and realized she was staring at the devil's bargain with no way out. Zara walked into Dr. Chen's sterile examination room wearing Camilla's designer clothes and carrying the weight of a lie that would change everything. The medical office in Midtown Manhattan smelled like antiseptic and expensive air freshener. Zara had been in hundreds of exam rooms, but never as the patient, never as an imposter. She'd spent the previous night memorizing Camilla's mannerisms, the way she tucked her hair behind her left ear, her slight southern accent from her boarding school days, the casual way she name-dropped luxury brands. Vivienne had coached her for hours, threatening her mother's memory with every mistake. Miss Harris, Dr. Chen entered, a petite Asian woman with kind eyes that made Zara's guilt multiply. Yes, Zara said, using Camilla's slightly higher pitch, her heart hammered against her ribs. I want him to know I've saved myself for marriage. The examination was humiliating and thorough. Zara lay back, staring at the ceiling tiles, counting them to distract herself from the violation of it all. She was a virgin, not by choice or philosophy, but because medical school and 12-hour shifts hadn't left time for relationships. Her last almost relationship was with Derek, a physical therapist who ghosted her after 3 dates when he realized she had no time for him. "Everything checks out," Dr. Chin finally said, snapping off her gloves. "I'll send the report to Mr. Wellington. You're healthy, and yes, your hymen is intact. You okay, dear?" She paused, studying Zara's face with concern. "I'm just nervous about the next steps," Zara whispered, which wasn't a lie. That evening, Vivienne handed her a red dress, designer, expensive, cut low enough to distract. "Tonight, you become Camilla completely. We've arranged everything at his penthouse. The champagne is laced with rohypnol, just enough to make his memory fuzzy. You go in, you do what needs to be done, and you leave before sunrise. Camilla will be there in the morning to claim the aftermath." Zara stared at the dress, at her reflection in Vivienne's compact mirror, and wondered if she'd recognize herself when this night was over. Marcus woke to blood-stained sheets and a pounding headache, with only fragments of a memory that felt more like a dream than reality. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his Tribeca penthouse, stabbing into his skull like hot needles. He groaned, pressing his palm against his forehead. The room spun slightly. He never got hangovers, never lost control like this. But last night was a blur of sensations. Soft skin under his fingertips, a whispered, "I'm sorry," that didn't make sense. The feeling of a raised scar on someone's wrist that his thumb had traced over and over. Jasmine perfume, not Camilla's usual Chanel No. 5. "Baby, you're finally awake," Camilla's voice cut through his confusion. She stood in the doorway wearing his dress shirt, her hair perfectly tousled, looking like she'd stepped out of a magazine spread. She carried a tray of coffee and croissants, playing the role of satisfied lover with practiced ease. "Marcus, he paused, studying her face. Something felt wrong, off, like watching a movie where the audio didn't quite sync with the video. "You were incredible," she purred, setting the tray on the nightstand and climbing onto the bed. She gestured to the crimson stain on the white Egyptian cotton sheets. "A little rough, but I expected that. You'd been waiting so long, and so had I." She kissed his cheek and he smelled her perfume. Chanel, familiar, but his memory screamed jasmine. I don't remember much," Marcus admitted, hating the vulnerability in his voice. "The champagne, you had a lot of drink, celebrating," Camilla said quickly. "You were nervous. I was nervous. It was beautiful, baby. Everything I dreamed it would be." She traced a finger down his bare chest. "You told me you loved me. You said I was everything you've been searching for." Marcus's head throbbed. Had he said that? He remembered warmth, softness, a feeling of unexpected connection, but the details were watercolor paintings left in the rain, bleeding into nothing. The door burst open without warning. Vivienne Harris swept in like she owned the place. Her eyes immediately landed on the stained sheets with theatrical shock. "Oh my God, Marcus Wellington, what have you done to my goddaughter?" Marcus's confusion crystallized into cold dread as Vivienne smiled like a shark smelling blood in the water. For 3 weeks, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that the woman in his bed that night wasn't the woman eating breakfast across from him every morning. He sat in his corner office at Wellington Tech, the Manhattan skyline spread out like a kingdom he'd built with code and ambition, but his mind was stuck on that night. His assistant had sent over the wedding planner's proposals, venues, caterers, florists, all waiting for his approval. The date was set, June 15th. Just 8 weeks away. His grandmother had already started addressing invitations. The merger documents, sat on his desk, ready for signatures that would bind Wellington Tech and Harris Pharmaceuticals forever. But something was eating at him from the inside out. Marcus pulled up the security footage from his penthouse for the 100th time. The cameras in the living room showed Camilla arriving at 8 p.m. in a red dress, her hair styled in loose waves. They showed her leaving at 6 a.m. in the same dress, slightly wrinkled. But the bedroom cameras, he'd always kept those off for privacy, showed nothing, just a black screen where his memories should be. He closed his eyes, trying to pull details from the fog. The scar. He kept coming back to that raised line of tissue on the wrist he'd touched. It had been thick, surgical, the kind left by a serious childhood injury. This morning, he'd grabbed Camilla's wrist during an argument about the wedding cake flavors, grabbed it specifically to check. Her skin had been smooth, flawless, marked only by a tiny mole near her thumb. "You're being paranoid," he muttered to himself, but his instincts, the same ones that had built a billion-dollar empire by age 30, screamed that something was wrong. His phone buzzed. A text from Camilla. "Missing you, baby. Can't wait to be Mrs. Wellington. Just picked out the most beautiful Vera Wang dress. Your grandmother loves it." Marcus stared at the message, and for the first time since proposing, he felt nothing. No warmth, no excitement, just a hollow echo where his feelings should be. That night, whoever she'd been, he'd felt something, a connection, a spark, even through the drugged haze. With Camilla now, he felt like he was dating a beautiful stranger performing a well-rehearsed script. He picked up his phone and dialed his head of security. "I need you to investigate someone. Find out everything about Dr. Chen's office and everyone who was there 3 weeks ago." Zara's hand shook so violently as she carried the lunch bag to Wellington Tech that she nearly dropped it twice on the subway ride from Harlem. She stood outside the gleaming tower in Lower Manhattan, staring up at 70 floors of steel and glass that seemed to pierce the clouds. For 3 weeks she tried to forget that night, the shame, the way Marcus's drugged eyes had still managed to see something in her, the tenderness in his touch even through the chemical fog. She'd scrubbed her skin raw in the shower afterwards, trying to wash away the memory of being someone else, of stealing something that hadn't been hers to give. But Vivienne wouldn't let her forget. The text this morning had been clear. "Camilla needs her lunch delivered to Marcus's office. You're her assistant now. Wear something sleeveless. Don't make me remind you what happens if you refuse." So here she stood, in a navy blue sleeveless dress from Target, nothing like Camilla's designer wardrobe, holding a bag from some overpriced organic bistro, feeling like she was walking toward her own execution. The scar on her left wrist, the one from the car accident when she was 7, burned like it knew it was about to be exposed. The lobby was all marble and minimalism. Security waved her through after she gave Camilla's name. The elevator ride to the 68th floor felt like ascending to judgment. Her reflection in the polished doors showed a woman barely holding it together. Natural hair pulled into a low bun, minimal makeup, exhaustion carved in the shadows under her eyes from double shifts at the hospital. The executive floor was hushed, expensive. Marcus's assistant, a sharp-eyed woman named Keisha, pointed to his office. "She's expecting a delivery. Go ahead." Zara knocked, her heart a war drum in her chest. "Come in," his voice called, and she pushed open the door. Marcus sat behind a massive desk, reviewing something on his tablet. He didn't look up immediately, just set it on the... He stopped mid-sentence when he saw her, His eyes locked on hers, and the tablet slipped from his hands, clattering onto the desk. The air between them crackled with recognition neither could name. I'm Camilla's assistant, Zara stammered, moving toward the desk. I came to bring your lunch. She held out the bag, and as he reached for it, their fingers touched. Time stopped as his gaze dropped to her exposed wrist, to the thick surgical scar there, and his face transformed from confusion to absolute shock. Marcus's hand shot out and gripped Zara's wrist with enough force to make her gasp, his thumb pressing directly onto the scar he traced in the darkness of that night. "Don't move," he said in a low and dangerous voice. The lunch bag fell to the floor, forgotten. He stood, slowly, still holding her wrist, his 6'3" frame towering over her. His eyes, those calculating, intelligent eyes, swept over her face like he was seeing it for the first time and recognizing it all at once. "Who are you?" he whispered, pulling away. Her pulse thundered beneath his grip. I'm nobody," she whispered, trying to pull away. "It just came to bring lunch." "Bullshit." Marcus walked around the desk, backing her against the wall without releasing her wrist. He wasn't rough, but he was immovable. "I touched this scar. 3 weeks ago, in my bed, I traced this exact scar while someone whispered, 'I'm sorry,' in my ear." "That wasn't Camilla's voice. That was yours." Tears spilled down Zara's cheeks before she could stop them. "They blackmailed me." She choked out broken sobs. "Vivienne said my mother stole money, said she'd destroy everything if I didn't pretend to be Camilla for one night. They drugged you. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I never wanted—"
Marcus released her wrist, but didn't step back. His jaw clenched, muscles jumping beneath his skin. "They drugged me? Set this whole thing up?" His voice was ice. "And Camilla? She was in on it?" "She's not a virgin," Zara whispered, wiping her eyes. "That's why they needed me. I look like her enough, and I was—" She couldn't say it, couldn't admit that part out loud. Jesus Christ. Marcus turned away, running his hands over his face. The silence stretched between them like broken glass. When he turned back, his expression had shifted from anger to something else, something that made Zara's breath catch. "What's your name? Your real name?" "Zara. Zara Mitchell." "Zara." He said it like he was tasting it, remembering it. That night, even through whatever they gave me, I felt something real. Was any of it real for you, or was it all just fear? Zara's heart cracked open. "I was terrified, but you were gentle. Even drugged, you kept asking if I was okay. You held me like I mattered, and I hated myself for it, but yes, some of it was real." Marcus pulled out his phone with shaking hands and said the words that would detonate everything. "I'm calling off this wedding, and Vivienne Harris is about to learn what happens when you try to destroy a Wellington." Marcus lowered his phone before dialing, his jaw tight with barely controlled rage, and said 4 words that shocked Zara more than anything. "No, not yet. Listen." He moved to the door, locked it, then turned back to her with the focused intensity of a predator planning its strike. "If I blow this up now, Vivienne destroys whatever evidence she has against your mother, Camilla plays victim, and the media circus buries the truth. I need time to investigate, to find proof of what they did, to dismantle this whole operation piece by piece." Zara shook her head, backing toward the window. "You can't still marry her. You can't actually go through with this wedding knowing what you know." "I won't," Marcus said firmly, "but I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" He stepped closer, and she saw something in his eyes she hadn't expected. Not just anger at being deceived, but concern for her. What evidence does Vivienne have on your mother? Bank statements, transfer records, emails, $200,000 allegedly embezzled from the Harris family trust. Zara's voice cracked. My mama worked for them for 15 years. She would never steal. But those documents looked real, Marcus. Real enough to destroy her memory and end my career before it starts. Marcus pulled out his tablet, fingers flying across the screen. I'm putting my forensic accountants on this today. If those documents are fake, I'll prove it. If they're real, he paused, meeting her eyes, then I'll pay back every penny and make this go away. Your mother's name will be cleared either way. Why would you do that for me? Zara whispered. You don't even know me. Don't I? His voice dropped lower, intimate. I know you whispered apologies in the dark instead of celebrating your deception. I know your hands trembled when you touched me. I could feel it, even through the drugs. I know you're a doctor who works in the ER, probably saving lives while drowning in debt. And I know that for one night, even in a situation built on lies, I felt something I've never felt with anyone else. Something true. The confession hung between them like a suspended breath. Zara's knees weakened. What do you want from me? Stay quiet. Keep playing Camilla's assistant. Let me gather evidence against Vivienne and Camilla. I need about 2 weeks, maybe 3. Can you do that without them suspecting you talk to me? They'll know something is wrong when you don't. I'll keep up appearances. Wedding planning, public dates, social media posts. Everything will look normal, but behind the scenes, I'm burning their world down. He reached out, gently touching her cheek. And when this is over, Zara Mitchell, I'd like to take you on a real date, one where neither of us is pretending to be someone we're not. Zara nodded, even as her heart screamed that she was falling for a man she'd met on the worst circumstances possible, and that the danger was just beginning. 6 weeks later, Zara stood in her tiny Harlem bathroom staring at 3 positive pregnancy tests lined up on the sink like accusatory fingers pointing at her ruined life. Her hands trembled as she picked up the 4th test, the digital one that spelled it out in cruel clarity. Pregnant 8 to 9 weeks. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead, and outside her window, someone's car alarm wailed, a soundtrack to her panic. She'd missed her period twice, blamed it on stress and 70-hour work weeks, ignored the morning nausea she chalked up to bad hospital cafeteria food. But her body had been screaming the truth she'd been too terrified to hear. She was carrying Marcus Wellington's baby. Oh, God, she whispered, sliding down the wall to sit on the cold tile floor. Oh, God, oh, God, oh, God. Her mind raced through impossible calculations. She made $58,000 a year as a resident. Her student loans totaled $240,000. Her apartment was a 4th-floor walk-up in a building where the heat barely worked. She was in no position to raise a child, especially not a child whose father was engaged to another woman in a mess so complicated it made soap operas look simple. Her phone buzzed, a text from Marcus. Accountants found irregularities in Vivienne documents. Meeting tonight, 9 p.m. My place. We're close to exposing everything. Zara stared at the message, then at the pregnancy test. She should tell him. She had to tell him. But fear wrapped around her throat like a noose. What if he thought she'd gotten pregnant on purpose? What if he accused her of being just like Camilla and Vivienne, another woman trying to trap him with a baby? What if he demanded she get rid of it? Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Camilla. Need you to pick up my dry cleaning and bring it to Marcus's grandmother's house. Tomorrow, big family dinner. Wear something that makes you invisible. The cruelty was casual, constant. For 6 weeks, Zara had played the role of Camilla's servant while watching Marcus pretend to be the devoted fiancé. They'd stolen moments, a touch in passing, coded text messages, one stolen kiss in the car garage that had left her breathless and aching. But they couldn't be together. Not yet. Not until the evidence was solid enough to destroy Vivienne's lies. Zara pulled herself up, splashed cold water on her face, and stared at her reflection. Her mother's face looked back at her, strong cheekbones, determined eyes, the same expression Mama had worn, working 2 jobs to put Zara through college. What would you do, Mama? But her mother was gone, her reputation still under attack, and Zara was alone with the secret growing inside her that would complicate everything. She grabbed her phone and typed a message to Marcus. Can't make tonight. Something came up. I'm sorry. Because she needed to figure out how to tell him she was pregnant before his world and hers exploded.
Camilla Harris stood in the Wellington family dining room, one hand dramatically pressed to her flat stomach, and announced the lie that would either save her or destroy her. Marcus and I are going to have a baby. The crystal chandelier above seemed to brighten with the collective gasp that rippled through the room. Eleanor Wellington, the family matriarch, dropped her wine glass. Dropped it, sending Bordeaux splashing across the white tablecloth like blood. Marcus's sister Naomi choked on her water. His father, Theodore Wellington Sr., stood so abruptly his chair scraped against hard wood with a sound like a scream. Marcus sat frozen, his fork suspended halfway to his mouth, his face a mask of shock that Camilla interpreted as joy. She'd planned this perfectly, the intimate family dinner, the romantic lighting, the moment when everyone was relaxed and happy. She'd even worn a flowing dress that could hide a non-existent bump. "A baby," Eleanor whispered, her hand clutching her pearl necklace. At 78, she'd waited decades for this moment. "Marcus, is this true?" Marcus's eyes found Camilla's across the table, and she saw it. The flash of cold calculation, the recognition that she'd just backed him into a corner in front of his entire family. "Camilla and I need to talk," he said carefully, "privately." "Talk? What's there to talk about?" Vivienne appeared in the doorway like she'd been waiting for her cue, champagne bottle already in hand. "My goddaughter's carrying the Wellington heir. This cause for celebration." She'd orchestrated this ambush with military precision, knowing Marcus couldn't expose them without looking like a monster who'd abandoned his pregnant fiancée. Theodore clapped Marcus on the shoulder, his eyes shining with pride. "Son, this is everything we've hoped for. The merger, the marriage, and now a grandchild. The Wellington legacy is secured." Naomi, the only one who seemed to sense something wrong, studied her brother's face. "Marcus, you okay?" He wasn't okay. Camilla could see rage simmering beneath his controlled exterior. But he smiled, that billionaire smile that had graced Forbes covers, and stood. "Of course, this is unexpected news. Camilla, let's step outside." They walked onto the terrace overlooking Central Park, the city lights glittering below like fallen stars. The moment the door closed, Marcus turned on her with eyes like ice. "You are not pregnant." "How would you know?" Camilla shot back, her southern accent thickening with desperation. "We made love 6 weeks ago. The timing is perfect." "We didn't make love. I was drugged and someone else was in my bed. We both know it." His voice was a whisper of controlled fury. "This is your next play? Fake a pregnancy to lock me in?" Camilla's mask cracked. Tears, real ones, born of genuine terror, filled her eyes. "My family is bankrupt, Marcus, completely broke. My father gambled away everything. If this merger doesn't happen, we lose the pharmaceutical company, the houses, everything. I'm 30 years old with a business degree and no actual skills. This marriage is my only option." "So you fake a pregnancy?" "I'm buying time," she hissed. "Time to figure something out. Time to make you fall in love with me for real. You wanted a virgin, a perfect wife, a dynasty. I'm giving you all of it. So what if the details got messy? The end result is the same." Marcus leaned against the terrace railing, and for a moment, Camilla saw something almost like pity in his expression.
The end result is a lie built on lies, and when it collapses, and it will collapse, everyone gets buried in the rubble. Inside, Eleanor Wellington was already on the phone with the wedding planner, moving the date up to accommodate the pregnancy, and Camilla realized she'd just lit a fuse she couldn't extinguish. Marcus set down the prenatal vitamin Camilla had strategically left on his bathroom counter and said the words that would unravel her entire scheme. "We need to schedule the first ultrasound, and I'm coming with you." Camilla's blood turned to ice water. She stood in Marcus's penthouse kitchen pretending to make breakfast, something she rarely did, while trying to figure out how to escape the trap she'd set for herself. 3 days had passed since her pregnancy announcement, 3 days of suffocating attention from the Wellington family. Eleanor had already started designing a nursery. Theodore had lawyers drafting trust fund documents. Naomi had sent her a care package full of pregnancy books and ginger tea. And Marcus? Marcus had been watching her like a hawk studying a mouse, waiting for her to make a fatal mistake. "An ultrasound already?" Camilla forced brightness into her voice. "Isn't it too early? I'm barely 6 weeks along." "Dr. Chen says we can see the heartbeat by 6 weeks," Marcus replied, scrolling through his phone with calculated casualness. "I've already made the appointment for Friday, 10 a.m. She's the best in the city. You remember her, right?" The emphasis on the last words was pointed, sharp as a blade. Camilla's hand trembled as she poured coffee she couldn't drink. Pregnant women avoided caffeine, she learned from frantic Google searches. "Of course I remember her, but maybe we should wait until 12 weeks. That's when most people announce." "Most people aren't Wellingtons," Marcus interrupted, setting down his phone and fixing her with those penetrating eyes. "Most people don't have their grandmother already planning a baby shower. We need to know everything is progressing normally. You want everything to be perfect for our child, don't you?" The "our child" landed like a punch. Camilla nodded mutely, her mind spinning through impossible scenarios. She could fake a miscarriage, claim stress, bleeding, loss, but that would require medical records, sympathy, and time. Or she could come clean, throw herself on Marcus's mercy, beg him to understand that desperation makes people do terrible things. "Actually," Marcus continued, his tone shifting to something more clinical, "Dr. Chen also recommended genetic testing, just to be safe. They can do it early now. NIPT testing as early as 9 weeks. It checks for chromosomal abnormalities and," he paused, watching her face, "confirms paternity through fetal DNA." The room tilted. Camilla gripped the counter to stay upright. "Paternity? You think I cheated on you?" "I think," Marcus said softly, dangerously, "that we should make sure everything is exactly as it should be, for the baby's health, for our peace of mind. Unless there's a reason you'd object to genetic testing." Vivienne's voice echoed in Camilla's memory from their panic call last night. "If he pushes for medical proof, you claim a miscarriage, stress-induced, blame his coldness, his suspicion, make him feel guilty. We can regroup and figure out a plan C." But looking at Marcus now, at the steel in his eyes, the way he stood between her and the exit like a prosecuting attorney who already knew the verdict, Camilla realized there was no plan C. There was only the truth catching up to her at 70 miles an hour. "I need to use the bathroom," she whispered, setting down her coffee cup before it shattered in her shaking hands. She locked herself in his marble bathroom, pulled out her phone, and texted Vivienne. "He's demanding DNA tests. I can't hold this much longer. What do I do?" And while downstairs, Marcus made a call to his lawyers with instructions that would end the Harris family forever.
Zara Mitchell walked out of Mount Sinai Hospital at 3 a.m. with her resignation letter submitted, her apartment lease terminated, and a one-way bus ticket to Atlanta tucked in her purse. running from the truth growing inside her before it destroyed everyone she touched. The pre-dawn air bit at her skin as she dragged her suitcase down 125th Street, past the shuttered bodegas and sleeping homeless encampments that had been her neighborhood backdrop for 3 years. Her phone buzzed incessantly. 17 missed calls from Marcus, 12 texts, 3 voicemails she couldn't bring herself to hear. She'd ghosted him completely. After missing their meeting 2 weeks ago, stopped responding to his messages, blocked Camilla's number entirely. She couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't be the mistress hiding in the shadows, couldn't watch him pretend to love Camilla while stealing glances at her across rooms, couldn't carry his child while his fake baby with another woman dominated headlines. Because yes, the pregnancy announcement had gone viral. #WellingtonAir was trending. Magazine covers featured Camilla's hand on her flat stomach, Marcus's hand covering hers, both of them smiling lies. "You leaving for good?" Mrs. Johnson, her elderly neighbor, stood in the hallway in her bathrobe, eyes sad and knowing. She'd watched Sarah come home crying too many nights, had heard her vomiting every morning, and probably figured out the truth without needing explanations. "Yeah, Mrs. J," Sarah whispered, hugging the woman who'd become a surrogate grandmother. "It's time for a fresh start." "That baby you're carrying deserves to know its daddy," Mrs. Johnson said quietly, touching Sarah's still flat stomach with gentle wisdom. "Running don't solve nothing, baby girl. Just postpones the reckoning." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "His life is complicated enough without me making it worse. He's got responsibilities, a family legacy, expectations. I'm the mistake that happened in the dark. You ain't nobody's mistake, and neither is that child." The Greyhound station in Midtown was fluorescent, bright and sad, filled with people escaping or searching. Sarah wasn't sure which category she belonged to. Her cousin Shyla lived in Atlanta's West End, worked as a nurse practitioner, and texted back immediately when Sarah asked if she could crash for a while. "Girl, yes, come home. Whatever you running from can't be worse than what you run into. We'll figure it out together." Home. Atlanta had been home before medical school, before New York's brutal ambition had swallowed her whole. Maybe she could start over there, raise this baby in a city where the pace was slower, the air was warmer, and Marcus Wellington's shadow couldn't reach her. She powered off her phone before boarding, ignoring the notification that showed Marcus was calling again. On the bus, watching Manhattan's lights fade into darkness, she pressed her hand to her stomach and whispered, "I'm sorry, little one. Sorry your mama's a coward. Sorry your daddy doesn't even know you exist. Sorry this whole thing is just such a mess." 6 hours later, when Marcus finally broke into her apartment with the super's help and found it completely empty except a note that said, "I'm sorry for everything. Please forget about me," he sank to his knees in the vacant living room and realized he'd lost the only real thing he'd ever had. Marcus Wellington III, the man who'd built an empire on control and precision, sat in his sister's living room at 2 a.m. and admitted the truth that shattered him. "I'm in love with a woman I spent one night with, and I just let her disappear." Naomi set down her tea, her Brooklyn brownstone quiet except for the radiator's hiss and her brother's ragged breathing. She'd gotten his call an hour ago, incoherent, desperate, nothing like the composed billionaire who calculated every move 3 steps ahead. Now he sat on her couch, still wearing yesterday's Tom Ford suit, looking like he'd aged 10 years overnight. "Start from the beginning," Naomi said gently, "and Marcus, don't leave anything out this time." So he told her everything, the virgin requirement that now seemed absurd and archaic, the deception, the drugged night with the woman who wasn't his fiancée, finding Sarah, the investigation into Vivienne's blackmail, the stolen moments over 6 weeks where he'd felt more alive than in his entire 35 years, the empty apartment, the note,
the suffocating realization that he'd been so focused on destroying the Harris family schemes that he'd missed what really mattered. "She's pregnant, Naomi. I know it. That's why she ran." His voice cracked. "The timeline matches. Her sudden distance, the way she stopped looking me in the eye, that text canceling our meeting. She found out and bolted because she thinks I'm marrying Camilla, having a baby with Camilla, living some perfect billionaire fairy tale that doesn't include the ER doctor I got pregnant during a setup." Naomi absorbed this, her lawyer brain processing. "Okay, first, Camilla's pregnancy is fake, right?" "Completely fabricated. My forensic accountants found evidence she's been buying positive tests online, faking symptoms. When I pushed for the DNA test, she had a convenient miscarriage yesterday. My grandmother actually cried. The media is painting me as the callous billionaire who drove his fiancée to lose her child. Then cancel the wedding. Publicly, right now." "I did." Marcus pulled out his phone, showing her the press release his team had sent out 3 hours ago. "Called it off completely. Told the family everything. Well, not everything about Zara, but enough. My grandmother is furious at the Harris family for the deception. My father's lawyers are dismantling the merger. Vivienne's fabricated evidence against Zara's mother has been exposed as fraud. She'll probably face charges." "Then why do you look like you lost instead of won?" Marcus's hands trembled as he set down the phone. "Because winning means nothing if I can't find her. I've got investigators searching, but she's smart, disabled her phone's location, quit her job with no forwarding address, disappeared completely. She's a ghost, Naomi, and she's carrying my child, probably terrified and alone, thinking I chose someone else." Naomi moved to sit beside her brother, taking his hand the way she had when they were kids and their parents' expectations had crushed him. "The Marcus I know doesn't give up. Ever. You built a billion-dollar company from a college dorm room. You're telling me you can't find one woman?"
"It's not about finding her," Marcus whispered, and this was the part that broke him. "It's about what I did to her. She was blackmailed, violated, forced to give away something precious, and I was the weapon they used. Even if I find her, why would she want me? I'm a reminder of the worst night of her life." Naomi squeezed his hand hard enough to hurt and said the words that would change everything. "Or maybe you're the father of her child and the first man who ever made her feel seen, and she's in Atlanta at her cousin Shayla Mitchell's house on West End Avenue, according to the hospital forwarding address I pulled up while you were talking." Marcus stood outside a modest house in Atlanta's West End for 3 months, not continuously, but in spirit, while his investigators confirmed what his heart already knew. Zara was 6 months pregnant and trying to build a life without him. The first time he'd flown to Atlanta, armed with Naomi's information and desperate hope, he'd made it as far as Shayla Mitchell's front porch before losing his nerve. Through the window, he'd seen Zara laughing at something her cousin said, her hand resting on a visible baby bump, her face more relaxed than he'd ever seen it in New York. She looked like she belonged there, in that warm, lived-in house with mismatched furniture and family photos covering every wall. What right did he have to disrupt the peace she'd finally found? So he left, flown back to New York, tried to convince himself she was better off without him. But he couldn't stay away. He bought a penthouse in Atlanta's Buckhead neighborhood and started splitting his time between cities, building a Wellington Tech satellite office as his excuse. He hired private investigators not to approach her, but to make sure she was safe, healthy, had everything she needed. When her car broke down, a lottery winner at her cousin's church mysteriously gifted her a reliable Honda. When her medical school loans went into forbearance with a note about a federal forgiveness program, that was Marcus too, paying them off completely under layers of legal anonymity. He couldn't be with her, but he could protect her from the shadows. His grandmother thought he was having a breakdown. His father demanded he focus on rebuilding Wellington Tech's reputation after the Harris scandal. Naomi was the only one who understood, who saw him watching surveillance footage of Zara leaving her prenatal appointments, seeing him memorizing every detail like a man dying of thirst watching water. This is stalking, you know. Creepy, obsessive stalking. I know, Marcus admitted, watching footage of Zara at a farmer's market, laughing with Shayla, buying fresh peaches. She wore a yellow sundress that showed her rounded belly, and she looked radiant. I'm in love with the woman who probably hates me, Naomi, and I don't know how to fix it. 3 months became a purgatory of almost moments. He'd be in a coffee shop where she got her decaf latte, separated by 3 people in line. He'd be at the clinic when she left her shift, watching from his car as she rubbed her aching back. Once, in a cruel twist of fate, they'd been in the same grocery store aisle. He'd frozen completely as she reached past him for prenatal vitamins. So close, he could smell her jasmine perfume. She hadn't even looked at him, hadn't recognized him without his usual expensive suits, wearing jeans and a Morehouse hoodie like any other Atlanta resident. That night, Marcus called his head investigator. I need you to find out if Zara's mother's name has been fully cleared. Every document, every record. I want her legacy restored completely. Scholarships in her name, donations to causes she cared about, a memorial at the hospital where she worked. Money is no object. Because if he couldn't give Zara himself, he could at least give her back her mother's honor, and hope that someday, when she was ready, he'd let him explain that some love stories begin in darkness, but are meant to end in light. Marcus's private investigator called at 6 a.m. with 4 words that stopped his heart. She's in labor. Grady Memorial Hospital. He was dressed and in his car within 3 minutes, breaking every speed limit from Buckhead to downtown Atlanta. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tight his knuckles went white. 3 months of watching from the shadows, of loving her from a distance and convincing himself she needed space. And now their baby was coming and he wasn't there. He should have approached her weeks ago, should have been at every doctor's appointment, every ultrasound, holding her hand through the fear and anticipation. Instead, he'd been a coward hiding behind good intentions. Grady Memorial's parking lot was chaotic at dawn. Ambulances, families, the constant churn of Atlanta's largest public hospital. Marcus abandoned his Mercedes in a loading zone and ran through the ER entrance, his heart hammering harder than it had during any business negotiation. Zara Mitchell, he gasped to the registration desk. Maternity ward. What was he? Not his husband, not his boyfriend, the man who'd gotten her pregnant under the worst circumstances imaginable and then stalked her from a distance for 3 months like some broke-down fool. I'm the father. The nurse, an older black woman with kind eyes and no patience for nonsense, looked him up and down, taking in his expensive clothes and desperate expression. Room 412, but baby, you better have a good explanation for why you just showing up now, because that girl been asking for you in her sleep. Marcus's breath caught. She has? Every contraction she whispers Marcus like a prayer. Now go. She buzzed him through. The elevator ride to the 4th floor was eternal. His reflection in the polished doors showed a man transformed by 3 months of longing, shadows under his eyes, a beard that he let grow, and clothes that were expensive but rumpled. He looked like what he was, a man who'd lost everything that mattered. Room 412's door was cracked open. He heard voices, Shayla's encouraging tone, a nurse's clinical instructions, and then Zara's cry of pain that cut through him like a blade. He pushed the door open just as another contraction hit. Zara's head was thrown back against the pillow, her hair plastered to her forehead with sweat, her hand crushing Shayla's in a death grip. She looked exhausted, beautiful, and so alone despite her cousin's presence. Then her eyes opened, locked on his, and time fractured into before and after. Marcus? Her name came out broken, disbelieving. You're here? He moved to her bedside like a man in a dream, dropping to his knees beside her bed. I'm here. I'm so sorry I'm late. I'm sorry for everything.
for not finding you sooner, for not telling you how I felt, for letting you think for even a second that I didn't want you, want this, want everything with you. You found me, she whispered, tears streaming down her face as another contraction built. How did you? I've been in Atlanta for 3 months, watching you from a distance like a fool who was too scared to face you. The car that randomly got gifted to you, that was me. The loan forgiveness, me. The clinic donations, all me. I couldn't stay away, Zara, but I didn't know how to come back. Shayla looked between them, eyebrows raised. So you the mystery man who been playing guardian angel? Boy, that's romantic and creepy in equal measure. Another contraction hit, harder this time. Zara's grip on Marcus's hand became crushing, and he welcomed the pain, proof that this was real, that he was finally where he belonged. Don't leave, he gasped. Please don't leave me again. Never, Marcus promised, pressing his forehead to hers as the nurse announced it was time to push. I'm not going anywhere, not now, not ever.
Grace Eleanor Wellington entered the world at 8:47 a.m. 6 pounds and 3 ounces of perfect humanity, and with her first cry, she shattered every wall Marcus had ever built around his heart. The delivery room erupted in controlled chaos, nurses moving with practiced efficiency, the doctor's calm announcements, Shayla's joyful crying, but Marcus only saw Zara, exhausted, radiant, reaching for their daughter with trembling hands as the nurse placed the baby on her chest. The sound Zara made, that primal sob of relief and overwhelming love, broke something fundamental inside him and rebuilt it all at once. She's here, Zara whispered, touching Grace's tiny fingers, her perfect nose, the thick dark hair that covered her small head. Marcus couldn't speak, could barely breathe. He watched his daughter, open unfocused eyes and seemed to look right through him to something eternal and true. When the nurse asked if he wanted to cut the umbilical cord, his hands shook so badly Zara had to guide them steady. "You're a daddy, Mao," Zara said softly as she watched him cradle Grace for the first time. The baby fit in his large hands like she'd been designed specifically for them, and Marcus understood suddenly why men went to war, built empires, moved mountains, to protect something this precious, this impossibly small and perfect. 2 hours later, after the medical staff had cleared out and Shayla had gone to make phone calls, Marcus and Zara were finally alone. Grace slept in the hospital bassinet between them, her tiny chest rising and falling with butterfly-light breaths. The afternoon sun streamed through the window, painting everything gold. "I need to tell you everything," Marcus said, pulling a chair close to Zara's bed. "And I need you to know that none of this, not one single moment, is about obligation or responsibility or Wellington legacy nonsense." Zara's eyes, red-rimmed from exhaustion and emotion, met his. "Then what is it about?" "It's about the fact that I fell in love with you that night. I know that sounds impossible. I was drugged. You were terrified. Everything about that situation was wrong. But somewhere in that darkness, I felt you. The real you. Your kindness, even while you were being forced to deceive me. Your whispered apologies. The way you trembled, not with desire, but with genuine fear. And I, even through the chemical fog, wanted to protect you." Tears spilled down Zara's cheeks. "Marcus, let me finish," he pleaded. "When I found you in my office that day, when I saw that scar and everything clicked into place, I wasn't angry at you.
I was angry at them for using you. And then we had those 6 weeks of stolen moments. And Zara, every second with you felt more real than anything in my entire life. You challenged me, saw through my billionaire facade, made me laugh in parking garages, and think about things beyond quarterly earnings. He leaned forward, careful not to wake Grace. When you disappeared, I lost my mind. I've spent 3 months in Atlanta watching you from afar because I was too scared to disrupt the peace you'd found. I thought you hated me, thought you saw me as the weapon that had been used against you. But baby, his voice cracked, I need you to know that I don't want you because of Grace, though she's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. I want you because you make me want to be a better man, because your strength humbles me, because I haven't had a full night's sleep in 3 months, knowing you were out there thinking I'd chosen someone else. Zara reached for his hand, her grip weak but certain. I ran because I was scared you'd think I trapped you like Camilla tried to, scared I'd ruin your life even more than it had already been ruined, scared that what we had in those stolen moments was just adrenaline and proximity, not something real. Was it real for you? Marcus asked, afraid of the answer. Every second, Zara whispered. Even that first night, through all my fear, there was a moment when you touched my face and asked if I was okay, and I felt something I'd never felt before. Safe. Seen. And then in your office, in those 6 weeks, Marcus, I fell so hard I couldn't see straight. That's why I had to run, because loving you felt like standing on the edge of a cliff with no safety net. Marcus stood, moved to sit on the edge of her hospital bed, and cupped her face with infinite gentleness. Then let me be your safety net. Let me spend the rest of my life proving that this, us, is real. Not because of circumstances or babies or family expectations, but because I choose you. Every single day, I choose you. Grace made a small sound in her sleep, and both of them turned to look at their daughter, understanding without words that this tiny human had just rewritten both their futures into something neither had imagined but both desperately wanted. Eleanor Wellington stood in the doorway of Grady Memorial Hospital, room 412, took one look at her great-granddaughter, and said the words that shocked everyone. Thank God you didn't marry that Harris girl. This is what real love looks like. Marcus's head snapped up from where he'd been dozing in the chair beside Zara's bed, Grace cradled against his chest in perfect contentment. He'd called his grandmother an hour ago, expecting judgment, disappointment, maybe even disinheritance. Instead, she'd chartered a private jet from New York and arrived with a determination that reminded him why Eleanor Wellington had survived 78 years of high society politics. Grandmother? Marcus started, carefully standing so as not to wake the baby. I know this isn't what the family expected. Hush, Eleanor said, moving into the room with surprising grace for a woman her age. She wore Chanel and pearls even for a hospital visit, but her eyes, sharp, assessing, kind, were focused entirely on the sleeping infant. Mrs. Wellington, I'm so sorry, Zara began, but Eleanor raised one elegant hand. You have nothing to apologize for, child. She approached Marcus, studying Grace with an intensity that made him protective. Then, unexpectedly, she smiled, a real smile that transformed her usually austere face. She has your father's nose, Marcus, and look at all that hair. May I?
Marcus,
carefully transferred Grace into his grandmother's arms, watching with held breath as Eleanor cradled the baby with practiced ease. She'd raised 2 children and helped raise him and Naomi when their parents had been too focused on building the business. "What's her name?" Eleanor asked, her voice softer than Marcus had heard it in years. "Grace Eleanor Wellington," Zara said quietly. "We wanted to honor you." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears, actual tears that she didn't bother hiding. She sat carefully in the chair Marcus had vacated, still holding Grace, and looked between Marcus and Zara with an expression that held decades of Marcus sat on the edge of Zara's bed, transfixed. He'd never heard this version of his family history. "His family had expectations," Eleanor continued, her voice steady but weighted with memory. "They wanted him to marry someone from the right background, with the right pedigree, from one of the old families, someone suitable." She laughed, bitter and knowing. "I was none of those things. His mother demanded proof I was worthy, demanded a virginity test, just like Marcus demanded of that Harris girl." Zara gasped. Marcus felt his world tilting. "I refused," Eleanor said simply. "Told Theodore that if he couldn't take me on faith, on love, on the promise of who we could be together, then he could marry whoever his mother picked. I packed my bag and headed to the bus station." She looked down at Grace, stroking the baby's cheek with infinite tenderness. "He found me there, proposed right there in the Greyhound station, with a ring he'd bought with his last paycheck, told his family they could accept me or lose him. We eloped that night." The room was silent except for Grace's soft breathing. "I became obsessed with respectability after that. Spent 50 years trying to prove I belonged in society, that I deserved the Wellington name. I demanded things of this family, traditions, requirements, standards that I myself would never have met. I became the very thing I'd fought against." She looked up at Marcus, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. "I almost made you repeat my mistake, grandson. Almost made you marry for pedigree instead of love." Marcus moved to kneel beside his grandmother's chair. "You couldn't have known." "I should have known," Eleanor interrupted. "The moment you told me about the virginity poking, I should have told you this story. Should have said that love, real love, doesn't come with conditions or medical certificates or family approvals. It comes from seeing someone's soul and saying, 'Yes, this one, forever.'" She turned to Zara, her expression fierce and protective. "My dear, I don't care that you're not from society. I don't care that you met my grandson under complicated circumstances. I don't care about any of the nonsense that I used to think mattered." She gestured to Grace. "This child is a Wellington. You are a Wellington if you'll have us. And anyone who has a problem with that can answer to me." Zara started crying in earnest, and Eleanor handed Grace back to Marcus so she could move to embrace this young woman who'd accidentally become family, proving that sometimes the best legacies are the ones we choose, not the ones we inherit. 6 months after Grace's birth, Marcus Wellington stood in a small chapel in Atlanta's Sweet Auburn district and married Dr. Zara Mitchell in a ceremony that had nothing to do with empire building and everything to do with love. The chapel was intimate, historic, the same one where Martin Luther King Jr.'s parents had married decades ago. Sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, painting the worn wooden pews in jewel tones. No society photographers, no magazine spreads, no 500-person guest list. Just family. Eleanor Wellington in the front row holding a babbling Grace, Naomi as maid of honor, Shayla standing proud, Marcus's parents looking humbled and genuinely happy, and a handful of friends who'd watched this unlikely love story unfold. Zara walked down the aisle on her own 2 feet, no one to give her away because she'd always belonged to herself. She wore a simple cream dress from a boutique in West End, her natural hair styled in elegant twists, her mother's pearl earrings the only jewelry beside the engagement ring Marcus had proposed 3 months earlier. She looked nothing like a society bride and everything like herself, which made her the most beautiful woman Marcus had ever seen. "Are you sure about this?" Zara had asked him that morning, feeding Grace her bottle in the apartment they now shared in Atlanta. Marcus had moved Wellington Tech's headquarters south, claiming better tax incentives, but really just wanting to wake up next to her every day. Marrying the woman who pretended to be someone else, starting a family backwards, walking away from New York society? Marcus had taken Grace, burped her with practiced ease, and kissed Zara until they were both breathless. "I've never been more sure of anything. You're my real beginning, Zara. Everything before you was just rehearsal." Now, standing at the altar, watching her approach, Marcus felt that truth in his bones. The pastor, an old friend of Zara's mother, smiled warmly as Zara reached the front. Marcus took her hands, and she was trembling slightly. "Nervous?" he whispered. "Terrified," she admitted. "What if I mess this up? What if I'm not good enough for the Wellington legacy?" "Baby," Marcus said, loud enough for the small gathering to hear, "you are the Wellington legacy now. You and Grace. Everything else is just paperwork and pride." The ceremony was brief, personal. They'd written their own vows. Marcus went first, his voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm him.
"Zara, we met in darkness and deception, but you became my light. You showed me that real strength isn't control, it's vulnerability. Real wealth isn't money, it's waking up next to someone who sees all your flaws and loves you anyway. Real legacy isn't bloodlines, it's raising a daughter who'll know she's loved unconditionally, who'll never have to meet impossible standards to deserve belonging. I promise to spend every day earning your trust, honoring your strength, and being the man you and Grace deserve." Zara wiped tears away, then pulled out her own handwritten vows. "Marcus, you could have destroyed me when you discovered the truth. Instead, you saw me, really saw me for the first time in my life. You cleared my mother's name when I couldn't. You watched over me and Grace from the shadows because you cared more about our well-being than your pride. You've shown me that love isn't about perfection. It's about choosing each other when everything's messy and complicated and hard. I promise to be your partner, your truth teller, your safe place. I promise to build something real with you, not an empire, but a home." Grace chose that moment to shriek happily from Eleanor's lap, and the whole chapel erupted in laughter. "I think that's her blessing," the pastor said, grinning. "By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Marcus, kiss your bride before your daughter demands attention." The kiss was tender, deep, full of promise. When they pulled apart, Marcus rested his forehead against Zara's. "Ready to start our real life, Mrs. Wellington?" "Dr. Wellington," Zara corrected with a smile. "I'm keeping my credentials and your name. Best of both worlds." "That's my girl," Marcus laughed. The reception was at a soul food restaurant in West End. Fried chicken, collard greens, mac and cheese, sweet tea, and peach cobbler. Eleanor Wellington ate with her fingers and declared it the best meal she'd had in 50 years. Marcus's father apologized to Zara directly for the family's initial coldness. Naomi gave a toast about how love makes fools of us all, but the best kind of fools. Later, as the sun set over Atlanta and Grace slept in her carrier,
Marcus and Zara stood outside the restaurant watching the city lights flicker on. He pulled her close, and she fit against him like she'd been designed for that exact space. "You know what's wild?" Zara said, her hand finding his. "That night, the worst night, the night I thought would haunt me forever, that was actually the beginning of the best thing that ever happened to me." "Same," Marcus admitted. "I spent 35 years building walls, collecting accomplishments, chasing some idea of perfection that didn't exist. Then you stumbled into my life scared and apologizing, and suddenly nothing else mattered except finding you again." "We're really doing this?" Zara asked. "Building a life together, raising Grace, merging your tech empire with my freak clinic dreams?" "Already done," Marcus said, pulling out his phone to show her the documents his lawyers had finalized that morning. "The Mitchell Wellington Medical Foundation officially launched today. $10 million in initial funding with you as executive director. Free clinics in underserved neighborhoods, medical school scholarships for students like you, research grants focused on maternal health in Black communities. Your mother's name is the first on the donor wall." Zara's breath caught. Fresh tears spilled over as she read the documents, seeing her mother's legacy restored, expanded, transformed into something that would help thousands. "Zara, this is what real legacy looks like," he interrupted gently. "Not virgin brides or pure bloodlines or society approval. It's making the world better because you were in it. It's raising a daughter who'll know her grandmother's name stood for something. It's choosing love over everything else, especially when it's complicated." Inside, Grace woke with a cry. They could hear Eleanor cooing to her, Shayla singing softly, family gathering around the newest Wellington with unconditional acceptance. "Come on, husband," Zara said, tugging Marcus toward the door. "Our daughter needs us." "Our daughter," Marcus repeated, tasting the words like honey. "Our family, our real beginning." They walked back inside together, and the door closed behind them on a story that started with deception but ended with the rarest thing of all: truth wrapped in love, messy and imperfect and absolutely real. The Wellington Empire would continue, but it would be built on something stronger than tradition. It would be built on the courage to choose love when the world demanded perfection, and the wisdom to know that sometimes the best legacies begin in darkness but are meant to end in light.
If you made it to the end, you're part of the real ones. Drop a heart and tell me where you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. This community is global. I see viewers from Atlanta, Lagos, London, Toronto, Kingston, Accra. Where are you? Comment your city and subscribe so you never miss a story. New here? Welcome! Hit subscribe and join thousands of romance lovers from around the world. Veterans, drop your location and how long you've been here. I want to give you a shout out. Comment where you're watching from and subscribe, and I might feature your city in the next video. Before you go, 1, subscribe if you haven't. 2, tell me where you're from. And 3, share this with someone who loves messy romance. Let's grow this family.